Hey, welcome to Trope-O-Sphere. I'm Jeremy, that's Deming.
Hey,
We're here, it's
welcome.
happening.
I'm
I'm
so
really
happy that
excited
you're
about this
here.
one. I'm happy that you're
Me
here.
too. Oh
This
my
is
gosh.
this is our newest show. We're breaking down what all kinds of iconic tropes throughout history. That's our mission statement here.
Film
And
history primarily, but like
primarily
cave
film
paintings.
history. Yeah, we won't get into those yet. I mean, who's to
Not
say?
this round.
I mean, based
Wait,
on
can we
what
try
we've
our high five? Can we try our high five really quickly? Because I think everybody will notice we have like a cool new setup.
It's kind of working. All right. Yeah, we got some real life green screen technology, and I can show that to you as we take a look at the structure. Hey, what's up?
Oomph,
It's the
oomph, oomph,
structure.
oomph.
Deming, walk us through this. Walk us through how we're doing this here.
Yes. So I was clearly put in charge of this part. um we're gonna get into a little bit around like what this is in some more detail in a moment, but we thought a really helpful way of breaking down essentially like film cliches would be by following the hero's journey, and that's going to be for us, the viewers, following that journey. We are going to essentially start out. We're going to learn a little bit more about it. We're going to murder it, and then we're going to bring it back to life with renewed knowledge or treasure, as it's saying
Just like an
here.
Evanescence
Um,
song.
yeah, we're gonna wake you up inside, and ideally, we finish here with like some new ideas, both about film, television, culture at large, maybe yourself, and but we also definitely want to make sure
Vicious.
that one of the final goals is that you have a better understanding of how to enjoy things that incorporate this potentially not so cool cliche.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of identified the structure, let's kind of break down what a trope is. So
Good call.
essentially, I mean, I don't, without getting into the dictionary definition, a trope is like a visual or audio or subtextual marker that is assigned to a person, place, or thing in a fictional narrative to give it imbued extra meaning that is basically channeled through kind of common cultural touchstones. So
Mhm.
if a superhero is wearing a cape, when we see the cape, that's kind of how we identify them as a superhero. That's one kind of common example that's used in the discussion of how tropes work. But there's all kinds of tropes, big
Shout
and
out your
small.
favorite tropes in the chat.
If it's a trope, I would say a classic. Like here's a classic trope: the like awkward nerdy best friend. That's a
Mm-hmm.
classic trope.
Right. In the kind of the heteronormative male side, whereas the
Sure.
lady side, we get like the sassy, more sexual best friend. As somebody who's always been the Judy Greer in her own life, I
Yeah.
completely relate to that
That's also
trope.
the spot that the gay friend ends up in a lot of the time is
Ooh,
like,
certainly, certainly. Mm-hmm.
"Ham girl."
I think I think I've seen some really good satires of that role where it's like, yes, my house is on fire, but we have a makeover to get to. Like obviously these people have no inner lives of their own that have any prioritization that makes sense relative to the protagonist, which is something we'll
Yeah.
touch on today.
Hey, big shout out to the meet cute, an absolutely fantastic trope that we got deep into in
Yes.
our rom com structure discussion.
So true.
That video still lives on our YouTube. And also, I'm seeing a shout out here to the unrequited secret gay romance, which
Oh
is
my
a
gosh.
less common trope, although I suppose it's coming up in the world.
I
I don't
think
know.
I think it's become a little bit like I think that perhaps like the unrequited now it's been like we're secret gay romance curious at this point. I think like a good example of this done sort of well recently was the Netflix original like rom-com called, I think it's called The Half of It, where it's sort of about like a girl who is the Cyrano de Bergerac to a straight guy who has a crush on a girl, but they both have a crush on that girl, and
Uh
it's just kind of
oh.
interesting. So
Classic
that one I think
Cyrano.
is done quite well.
All
Hmm.
right, I'm here for it. Let's get into the specifics here. Let's talk about what we're talking about, which is the Manic
Yes.
Pixie Dream Girl. Specifically, Deming, your definition,
Yes.
please.
Yeah, so the MPDG, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. So I think that we're gonna have a pretty straightforward definition of this because it's a pretty one-dimensional character. That's actually one of the biggest traits of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She is a character, typically a straight lady, typically a white lady, typically is somebody who's very marketably attractive, but not in what I would call like a beer commercial sort of way, more in a like a sexually innocent sort of way. So we do not see blonde Manic Pixie Dream Girls very commonly.
Not
And
really.
Right. And so it's somebody that's like, oh, she's not like other girls, even though she's very mainstream attractive. And typically her differentiators are enthusiasm for again very mainstream things, and somehow they are responded to by other characters as quirks. But I think that the key definition or the key defining factor that we sort of settled upon was that the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is in fact not a character, but rather a MacGuffin in all
Yeah.
of these tales. So we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. We were talking about
Yes, we got into
examples of
MacGuffins.
MacGuffins. Do you have a good couple
I do.
examples or
I
good
do.
definition?
I think so. The first example that I actually learned, like in film school, about a MacGuffin is in Psycho, in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The $40,000 that Marion Crane steals. That is the
Mhm.
reason that she's on the run and then has to stay at the Bates Motel where she eventually meets Norman Bates. The $40,000 is a MacGuffin. It's the thing that gets you to the thing. In Star Wars, R2D2 is kind of the MacGuffin. He's got characteristics, like he's got traits, and they're usually almost entirely exclusively humorous. But he's the thing that gets you to the thing. He's the thing that's like, hey, I, a robot, want to bring these characters together so they have a reason to continue and pursue like their emotional goals. Similarly, we feel like that's the use of a Manic Pixie Dream Girl in most of these films that we'll be
Mhm.
discussing. That they're that they have certainly they're not to disparage their portrayals or the performance by the actors that portray them, but
Right.
the use of the character is often as an object. And essentially, kind of window dressing or a prop for the story that we as the audience are supposed to care about, which is
Right.
the male protagonist's arc. He's the one who gets to
Exactly.
grow and change, and the Manic Pixie Dream Girl just kind
Exactly.
of stays in her lane.
And she's also someone that sort of defines that character and other characters in terms of how they relate to her, so it's all sort of just relational rather than she having like interest in and of herself. There's no actual reason behind the quirks. It's not as though like she got really into knitting to deal with her anxiety issues, or like she
Sure.
started to scrapbook ever since her mother passed. There's nothing behind any of these quirks. However,
Right.
the way that other people interact with her quirks tends to be prioritized. But I will give a shout out to my favorite MacGuffin, which is it is the name of the bar in all of the AMC theaters. They're all called the
They
MacGuffin,
call
which
them MacGuffins.
I,
Yeah.
I miss it. It's the thing that gets the thing to happen.
They're
My
about to
my
be back,
favorite
guys. Theaters are coming back soon. Get ready.
any day now.
Get your popcorn ready.
Get your stomachs ready. But I
Get your.
think I think that oh, an example though, Jeremy, that I had thought of that we didn't discuss yesterday, that's
Yes.
maybe like the clearest example of just blatant MacGuffinism is the
Yes.
briefcase in Pulp Fiction.
Perfect example of a MacGuffin. It's not really. It doesn't really matter. Like it's the reason everybody
No.
has is in the room, but then they're in the room. That's when it happens.
We literally don't even know what's in it.
All right, let's move forward. Let's keep it going here. Let's talk
Yes.
about where this term came from. Deming, talk about it.
Yes. Yes. So we're going to talk about not so much the term MacGuffin, which is discussed. That's kind of a Hitchcock thing. The term Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Where does that come from? So the year is 2007. A young Demon Cassidy is about to graduate high school. Most importantly, but second most importantly, film critic Nathan Rabin writes this review of Elizabethtown, and in it, kind of identifies this trope. He does identify it in a way of like, oh, this is a type of character. This is an absurdly dull film about an absurdly dull main character. And then Kristen Dunst, who just kind of like makes mixtapes for him and whatnot,
Mhm.
and helps him to figure out his own shit without him actually having to do anything. So it was this film critic that identified this sort of trope. And I think there's a lot of examples that we might all be familiar with. There's been some kind of controversial ones in the chat thus far, but
Sure.
I don't know, Jeremy, if you have some ideas around other dominant, like obvious examples
Of this
of
trope?
Manic Pixie Dream Girls. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a few. We'll get into them. You know, I think of the ones that we're going to get into today. The one that stands out for me the most is an inversion. It's 500 Days of Summer. Because it's kind of where the rubber meets the road in that kind of characterization.
Right.
But I mean, the other one that I'm excited to get into here in just a moment is going to be when we talk about Jess from New Girl, who is also played by Zooey Deschanel. We'll get into that in a minute. But to get a kind of grip here on the sort of early discussions, we have a little clip we can show everybody.
We're gonna be watching stuff together, y'all.
Oh
so
yeah, guys,
comment,
this is not just you.
participate.
It's not just going to be Deming and I talking the whole time. So let's take a look here. Ooh, you know what? It's time for a little transition. I'm excited about it. It's time to start with beginning in the known. Yep, I think they can hear us when this is playing. Yeah, that's right. Act 1, beginning in the known, baby.
Yes.
All right. So,
Love it.
in this clip from Breakfast at Tiffanys, the absolutely ridiculously named Holly Golightly is living the quirkiest human life physically imaginable. See if we can get some audio on that too.
Well, this is a nice little place you got here.
Big deal. But like
Yeah,
maybe
they
it's
can
just
just
like
look at it
quirky
too,
and
huh?
silent.
No, they got it.
The phone's over there.
Okay.
I mean, just like she's wearing a blindfold with eyelashes.
I love it.
It's pretty spectacular.
Kind of muffles the sound.
Yep,
Again,
put her
upper neck.
phone in the suitcase to muffle the sound. Not for a good reason, because it muffles. I mean, that is a good reason, but not for a character-driven reason. Love this.
Sorry.
Right. And
She's
she's
just-
like
she's just
unabashedly.
You all right?
Yeah, she's like unabashedly like
Sure,
doing
he's okay,
unconventional
cat.
Yeah.
things.
There's a moment where
and
I'm
that's kind
so
of
sure
cool.
she's. There's a moment here I'm so sure she's about to put this cat in the fridge, and
Well, I
then
look
she
at it, I
doesn't.
don't have the right to give him one.
I was so sure the first time I watched this for our research
I don't
that
even want to own
she was gonna
anything until I can find a place
throw
where
this
me and things go
cat in
together.
the fridge, but she
I'm not
doesn't.
sure where that is, but
But she does have ballet slippers in the closet.
it's like Tiffany's.
Another
Tiffany's?
classic
You mean the jewelry
identifier.
store?
That's right.
She's just all over the map. Her shelves aren't on straight. She's wearing a tuxedo shirt. None of this is explained, but all of it is super mystifying to our main male sort of love interest guy here.
Because you're getting fat, maybe
Um,
it's been raining too long. You're just
and-
sad, that's all.
Yeah.
just doesn't, you know.
I mean, woods are horrible. Suddenly you're
Well,
afraid and you
it's
don't
sort
know
of
what you're
like
afraid of.
he's not objecting though
get that
in a
feeling?
way that makes sense in the
Sure.
real world. I think this is
Well,
something
I
we'll
get
keep
the
talking
idea
about.
that
He's not
any
objecting
girl
and
is
being like,
jump
"Do you
into
need
a cab and
help?
go to
Like, are you
Tiffany's.
good?"
Girls go down
Or like,
right away.
"Why did you do that further?" Like, there's no other
Madness in
questions.
the
He's just sort of
crowd,
like,
look of it,
"Ugh,
nothing very
you're
bad happens
wild."
there.
And
Huge shout
I'm
out to this
thrilled.
bathtub couch, though.
Place that made me feel
Oh, I'm
like
sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't mean to cut you off
well,
there, Demi.
No, you good. You good. I
Alright.
do
I'd
want
buy
that
some
couch.
furniture and give the cat a name.
See, and that's another thing is that I like a lot of these
Oh,
things,
tell
but
her.
I'm a fully formed
It's
human
just that I was supposed to
person.
meet somebody.
And I think
just-
that this gal
just 10
deserves to
o'clock
be
Thursday morning,
recognized
isn't
as
it?
a fully formed
Just got off the
person
plane
as
for
well.
Rome, and I'm not too sure.
Yeah. So we'll pause this here. That's basically kind of a little taste of the energy that she's kind of bringing. Up next, she'll tell us that she's paid $100 a week to visit a dude in jail named Sally Tomatoes and just give him the information in a way that's very like doe-eyed and silly. And then there's, you know, she's just she tells him to find her shoes under the bed. And then it kind of just jumps ahead to, I just want to show this moment because it's ridiculous to me. He's already starting to
Superhero
totally fall in
moment.
love with her. Yeah, this is her superhero moment. This is her descending the staircase in long hair. Oh shit, I just skipped right past it as I went to hit.
This is her phone booth.
Yeah, this is her phone booth. Let's see
I
here.
went to visit him once a week. Well, how could I say no? It was all so wildly romantic.
Bam.
How do I look?
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Oh yeah, she was in there for
I
2
must say I'm
seconds.
amazed.
Yeah, she's in
Went
there for
from-
maybe
Yeah,
15
I could never have
seconds.
done it without you. Bag?
Call me anytime.
I never would have done it without you.
Just upstairs.
Just handing her
Oh.
I
the
will be
shoes.
as soon as I get moved in.
Bye, Cat.
Yep.
At this point, she no longer cares about him, which I find fascinating. She is like not. She doesn't give him another look. She just walks out of there.
He could have just stayed there and robbed her. Yeah.
Sure.
But she's like not threatened by him, not affected. She's not affected by anything, I think is the point. Actually.
She's purely, it kind of exists as a fantasy. Like, she very rudimentarily describes anxiety in the beginning, where she's just unafraid, and it's not clear to her why. And
That's exactly
her solution is to just go eat breakfast at a jewelry store. Like, that's a fascinating choice, and it isn't like one that we should inherently discount as meaningless, but we're not shown its meaning. Like, that's kind of the anyway. That part, that sort of lack of work, is how things often get tropified. Tropes are shortcuts. Sometimes they're valuable, sometimes they're shorthand, but when they're used in some of the ways that we're just gonna get into, they're just kind of harmful.
Yes.
Deming,
It's
any other thoughts on this?
And it's reductive, and it allows for I think that something we talk about a lot is the idea that we interact with media a lot more than we interact with people. And I don't just mean in quarantine times. I mean in general. Like, I've seen a lot more people that were fictional or that were fictionalized than I've seen in real life. And as a result of that, that's how a lot of people just learn how to feel, learn how to interact, learn how they should behave in situations that they haven't been in yet. And so when we have a character that's treated like an object, it actually, I think, can sometimes teach the viewer to then interact with people who they find also have those traits, people wearing ballet flats, people who do things that they might see as quirky. It causes them to then think that the best way to interact with this entity is in the way that I've learned. So that's going to be in the sense that okay, this is somebody that can teach me how to be more adventurous, or can help enrich my life in some way. It's going to do something for me, and that I'm not going to expect, or in fact, I'm going to expect that they never change. I think are kind of the big things. Yeah. I can't hear you for some reason.
That's my fault. I had muted myself for a moment. No, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think that, in particular, the thought that we've seen so many more fictional people than real people is actually very profound. Dropping some science out here, Deming. I'm very glad I had you in the one shot when you said that.
Oh, goodness.
So this is a perfect time to bring in a question from our chat from God Eats Bagels, which is, are we talking about tropes or stereotypes generated by tropes? Does one preclude the other? I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg thing. I do think that a lot of what we get, and I've really struggled with this. A lot of my kind of course of study in school was specifically about like artist intent and the like art as a reflection of its time versus art as like an engine of culture that drives the times. We don't have nearly as much like open discussions about what a healthy relationship looks like than we have romantic comedies. We don't, like, as far as just like public discourse, we don't have nearly as many like discussions about the use of force as we do violent images in the culture. Right. And that's not to say that there's no place for these portrayals. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Fast and Furious movies where people are clearly killed by the thousands off screen in massive vehicle accidents, and we're just we don't have to care about it. It's not what it's for.
That's funny. Can I just say, like, quickly, that was exactly what I thought of, because I think you're making a really good point here, is that the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is the romantic equivalent of a bloodless, violent film. It's like a PG-13 action film,
it's sanitized.
which is bizarre to me because I think that Well, in Europe, not to be hell of annoying, but like it's the inverse, right? Where and I'm not talking about sexuality versus violence. I'm talking about cartoonish violence is actually typically more restricted than like violence that actually shows the impact of it. And I think that's how it should be. And I think it's really dangerous that we're showing things like, okay, it's okay for young children to see a film where people are getting shot as long as there's no blood. That's absolutely the wrong message. And I think that
Absolutely.
similarly, essentially, it's taking a kind of stereotype to God Eats Bagel's point, right? Like, sure, there are obviously stereotypes about women, but it's sort of packaging it up for ease of replication, and then it's showing it to be like a bloodless romance. It's okay. You can do whatever you want to this romance because like everything's gonna be fine in the end because it's not a character, it's a object.
Yeah. I mean, I guess another way of answering that question is that tropes are generated by who has the microphone. Like tropes are generated by who has the spotlight and who has the stage. And in the case of all these films, they're all just like white dude writers. And so they're setting those terms. So in a sense, this is a little bit of both as far as like the stereotyping generated by the trope. Like because they're not necessarily, it's not like the deliberate perpetuation of a stereotype. And also, of course, all artists also steal from their own cultural influences.
Yeah.
So there's very little like pure idea generation that isn't influenced by outside media sources and whatnot.
Of course.
Like
Of
no,
course.
like the people who are making 24 didn't like come up with how to depict a terrorist, but they didn't innovate either. They were just
Well,
making television. They were just
I think
making money and selling a show.
I completely agree. This is kind of making me think about, and I think this might be getting back to a point that you raised that was really good, just around like examining like the intent and all those things. But right, like in literature, right, it's a very modernist kind of dude author thing. It's like Hemingway, like volunteering to drive ambulances in France for the life experience so he can be a better writer because you write what you know,
Sure.
etc.
Yeah.
But like there's very toxic ways of doing this, and I think that it's a combination, and frankly, like, okay, whatever, maybe you're a fucking toxic person and so you're
That's
making
going to bring
toxic
us back
art.
to 500 Days of Summer.
That's
We
exactly
don't
what I was about to
get ahead of
go.
ourselves there.
That's
So
exactly what I was like laying a little egg for,
Mhm.
but just saying that
Yep.
like it's a combination of that and the fact that to combine it with your other point or kind of braid it together like a dang French braid on a girl in a fit and flare dress.
Go on.
um it's it's the fact that there's no contrary voices, there's no other like dominant mainstream options. I can't also see a movie about like a delightful himbo that enriches my life, right?
I
But
mean,
I know
well,
this is
we'll
my
get
way
into
of
this in a
helping
little bit
us,
later.
yes, to get
This is
into
a
that as
perfect
well.
segue to our next segment. So
I
let's
got
talk
you.
about Act 2. I'm excited. Act 2, Descent to the Underworld. Yeah. We got a little animation. We get to show it to you. We're descending into the underworld. And we're back on camera, and here we are.
Back in camera, back on camera, dancing in the underworld.
So, in the way that we're gonna...
Manic Pixie Dream Girl, discuss.
Perfect. So, to take a step deeper into this, let's look at kind of, I think the demarcation line that we discussed was basically how these portrayals started coming out after it had been named, after this article by Nathan Rabin that very famously coined this term. Then what do portrayals of Manic Pixie Dream Girls look like after that? Because we basically at that point we get to talk about how it all kind of comes together. So let me get that up here for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to say as like a kind of structural spoiler alert that what we want to talk about as we descend into the underworld, as we start to murder this trope, is failed attempted perversions, because I think that like a proper perversion would actually do something new and interesting, and just because you're sort of like meta and aware of the trope, which is kind of where we are right now in our discussion, it doesn't mean that you're actually successfully subverting shit. And in fact,
Right.
perhaps you're just like underscoring it further.
Exactly. Like it, like kind of, you take a look at the sort of failed comic book movies after Superman, where I mean, like, I know I'm gonna offend some Tim Burton stands in here, but like it wasn't like it wasn't like there were new it wasn't like there were new ideas brought in by those movies. They were just a new aesthetic, really, on this same structure. So similarly, like, once somebody kind of takes everybody to school on what it is, and Elizabethtown is a good example of that, even though it wasn't a particularly commercially successful dealy.
Dealy, yeah.
Then we get things like, oh, I'm so excited for this one. Let me bump this one up full screen here as we take a look. Oh,
so
yes.
so set us up though. Set us up. What are we about to watch and why?
We're about to watch an iconic and sort of, and this was like I don't know if this was episode 1, but it was very early.
It's season 1.
It's season 1 of
season
New
1.
Girl. This was Zooey Deschanel and, oh my god, why am I blanking on this?
Lizzie Kaplan.
Kaplan. Thank you. I got there. It feels good. Basically, they have kind of she's playing like a business. Lizzie Kaplan is
She's
a business
a lawyer.
girl with no need for frilly things. I just mean, yeah, she is a lawyer literally, but I just mean she's like a person. Her role in that scene is like, I'm gonna wear all dark colors and have my hair in out of my face and kind of give stern looks, and then Zooey Deschanel gets to do this.
I got something to say to you, man. What? I break for birds. I rock a lot of polka dots. I
We all love
touched
Lizzie
glitter in the
Kaplan.
last 24 hours. I spend my entire day talking to children, and I find it fundamentally strange that you're not a dessert person. That's just weird, and it freaks me out. And I'm sorry I don't talk like Murphy Brown, and I hate your pantsuit. I wish it had ribbons on it or something to make it just slightly cuter. And that doesn't mean I'm not smart and tough and strong.
Okay.
And I know you like Nick, and I'm not trying to interfere, but you should just talk to him about it.
Are you done?
I am almost done. I'm about to go and pay this $800 fine, and my checks have baby farm animals on them, bitch.
It's the wrong way.
There you have that. I mean,
Yeah. So did you bump this up? Did you bump this up because God Eats Bagels brought up this really excellent point around lampshading?
Oh, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So I think that, a New Girl, and this is something we're going to continue to talk about because it's a show that Jeremy and I both like a lot, despite these issues. And again, our goal is to get to a place where we can enjoy things that include this trope that we have a lot of issues with. So this is, again, season 1, which is kind of, it's okay that it's a little bit simple, right? Because the character should ideally have growth over the course of it, and it's still early on. But I think that essentially the character in that scene is sort of, to God Eats Bagel's point, lampshading, purposely acknowledging the faults of a property while willfully participating in them.
Yeah.
Exactly what's happening, where it's sort of like, you're dating someone and they're like, I'm just kind of an asshole. And it's like, well, that doesn't make it better.
Cool to be an asshole, yeah.
If you acknowledge
that lampshading also happens a lot in those new Star Trek movies where they're constantly just acknowledging that it's fan service. And then it's still fan service. It's just kind of like, okay, I guess we're doing it.
Right. And it could be fan service with depth. And this could have been a moment with depth, but it's sort of in a weird way. She's projecting her own insecurities about the superfluous nature of some of her interests and whatnot. And she's similarly flattening this person that she's speaking to as a result of that. And like nothing, so what? Like, and again, I think that there's nothing behind, like, I've touched glitter in the last 24 hours or whatever. It's interesting that she's a teacher, and so some of this does make sense, and there is some heft behind it. But I think something else we'll continue to discuss is the fact that that's her character is stagnant throughout the entire run of the show, which was like 7 seasons, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's like every other character around her gets to grow. Even though the show is ostensibly about her, she's literally like, at the beginning of every episode, all the other characters make a big frame around her face. and
Yeah.
yet hers is the character that grows the least, and hers is the character that generates like really kind of the most mundane action for most of the show. Like our other characters are allowed to develop to other places because they don't have a brand to stay on. So
That's exactly
the
right.
writers get to find that character as they go, which is what great shows do. You know, if you watch a lot of great shows, they kind of discover what's going on with the character as it comes.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily that they come out at the outset and know everything that the character is going to grow to come to do. You know,
Right.
in their sort of arc. But with a character like Jessica in New Girl, the New Girl, it's like she's kind of always has to act like she's fucking new. She's always like
Yeah.
wide-eyed and doe-like and fully playing like every part of the trope of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She is like beaten into this role in her career. It's really like, I mean, we don't even have this listed, but this is a great time to talk about Yes Man. The Jim Carrey movie about, I mean, the movie is about Jim Carrey, like, it's a sad, lonely, grumpy, just like non-contributing person who is challenged one day to stop saying no to everything and start saying yes to stuff. And the first day he does this, he meets Zoe Deschanel's character, who is fucking adorable and like living her clearly her best fucking life in Los Angeles. Doing great, like to be doing well as an artist in Los Angeles is, by the way, is in its own way like a semi-complete personality. You know, there's a lot of people who are out there just like plugging away, but she's like getting after it. She's doing cool little gigs in bars, and she's not like, you know, she doesn't seem like a person who has an agent or is approaching it in a specifically not her way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because her point in this story is to help Jim Carrey's character see the value of active participation in life. Because this character is already doing that. So she's done. She doesn't need to do more stuff. The only stuff that she really does that involves acting is enforcing healthy boundaries. Like, I don't want to see you anymore because you're a jerk. That's not character growth. That's enforcement of an existing emotional boundary. It wasn't hard for her to say that. She didn't have to grow to come to a point to say that. She just had to see enough to have seen enough. And that's like her role in this. You know, that's not
No, I agree.
you know, and that's classic supporting character shit in all kinds of movies.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just like saying, oh my god, what a tragedy Zoe Deschanel played this character in this movie, but we need to be able to acknowledge like these facts are super harmful,
Right.
without, you know, there's a way to do this that doesn't have to be like this.
Right. Because I think to your point, like it wouldn't have added to the runtime if she got to have, I don't know, a motivation,
Sure.
a backstory, a challenge of her own, or like just depth to any of those existing traits. And I think that gosh,
I haven't
we've
seen
kind
it in
of
a while, but I feel like she starts and ends with her band playing in the same bar.
stagnation. And to Gotti Spiegel's point, right? Like
While
if you don't
being
move
good.
forward, stagnation is death.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening. And I think that perhaps like another point that we need to underscore here is the sort of like non-threatening, like sort of very virginal quality to these types of characters. Another sort of element to that. And this comes up like in New Girl, where she's sort of like, I don't know, sex is weird. Am I right? It's like, what? The
Yeah,
whole
it's
time.
weird.
And so that's from her perspective, that's how she behaves. And then very oddly, and this is quite common in a lot of the portrayals of this kind of character, they basically don't act like she's as hot as she is. Right. And so like even like in the New Girl pilot, all of them, she's model gorgeous. She's
Freaking Zoe Deschanel, she's gorgeous. Yes.
She's mostly just eyes and a tiny waist and just like beautiful.
If you ran into Zoe Deschanel on the subway, you'd remember it for days.
Yeah, and like and then they essentially behave, they're like, ugh, I don't know, do we want this weirdo to move into the loft with us? And then her, you know, a plot point that they decide to bring out to further underscore the fact that she's like not hot, I guess, is that her best friend is a model, equally attractive, and yet everybody reacts to her entirely differently. It's just a very strange kind of like
Well,
surreal thing that happens
that
in all
character
these films.
is allowed to possess an active
Mhm.
sexuality. I think that's the biggest difference. Like, you know, like Jess doesn't get to, but
Yeah.
ThICC is like a hot bikini model who, even if she isn't behaving in a sexual way, she's
Yeah.
actively an agent of the expression of her sexuality because she's a model. Like she's, you know what I mean? Like from the beginning, she's shown to be like a professional. It's not like I'm a dumb airhead model portrayal. She's shown to be like a person who's like, oh, I'm like a professional. I'm at my job. So that double like imbues that agency into that character, where Jess is like just not there, inexplicably a teacher of children, and yet totally uninterested in sex.
But like, no, but I think that the big weirdness
JK,
to
love the
me
teachers.
that's infectious though, like the infectious weirdness of this is that other characters basically like do not like lust for her for fucking no reason. They're just like, she's a little sing-songy, she does crafts, so obviously never been softer. Which
It's
is
fully
just
the
absurd.
same vibe as like we talked about, like Not Another Teen Movie, where it's like it's literally comical. They're just like, ugh, that paint on those overalls, those glasses, like blah. Like, it's just like, okay, whatever.
It's just it's so surreal, yeah. Where it's like the entire universe is negging Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
Well, speaking
because
of
they're not allowed to
surreal,
change.
potentially neggy portrayals, let's talk about being quirky with Zoe Deschanel, the SNL sketch. Let's take a look at it. Actually, it pretty much speaks for itself.
Love it.
There are short girls, tall girls, big girls, and small girls. But the best kind of girl is a quirky girl.
It's being quirky. And here's your host.
Her little
Zoe
sound is very
Deschanel.
funny to me.
Hey girl, I'm Zoe Deschanel, and I've never worn a thong. Welcome to Being Quirky, the show that celebrates the quirky lifestyle of friendship bracelets and with me in the kitchen, as always, is my BFF, Michael Sarah.
Hey, Zoe. It's just painting these eggs for Easter.
I forgot about that.
Speaking of like side-along tropes to the MPDG, the like sexless dude.
I mean, okay, now's the part of the show where I look like a guilty baby. Okay, now it's time for my first guest. Please welcome my BFF, Drew Barrymore.
Amazing.
Zoe, hey. Thanks for that singing telegram you sent me. It was such a fun surprise to open my door and see Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
He does whatever I say. So, Drew, I hear you may have a bun in the oven.
Come on, Zoe. You know I'm not one to conceive and tell. But just in case, I do have some great ideas for baby names.
That brings us to our first segment.
Boy.
Babies, babies, it's fun to name fake babies.
If I had a boy, I would name him Rolf because it sounds like a fat dog laughing.
I like to flip-flop human and pet names. That's why my gerbil's name is Steve, and my son's name will be Fluffy. The gerbil.
Oh my God. That's maybe the most beautiful name I've ever heard in my life.
And if I had a girl, I would name her
Dude, love a good Drew
It's
Barrymore.
a family name that my grandfather John Barrymore made up by falling asleep on an old typewriter.
I collect those. Okay, now's the part of
That's
the
a-
show where Drew and I dance and wink while Billie Holiday plays.
Sugar, I call my baby my sugar. I never maybe my sugar. Baby is my special.
Oh yeah. And then this is the end. Like, does it smell like cocaine to you?
My next guest is one of the first quirky girls to have her own TV show, like me. Please welcome
boy.
Fran Drescher.
Yep.
Your voice
Oh,
is
boy.
really loud.
I know. The
Talk
guys
about a
in the
trope.
alley used to call me the bullhorn.
This is like a
code name, but said without
Russian
the-
nesting doll of tropes
Yep.
really happening to us.
Man, you were a quirky pioneer with your weird style and accessories. Any tips?
Oh my god, yeah! You have to have a signature sound.
Oh, I never thought of that.
I know, but quiet, it's a secret.
Okay. Now it's time for a quirky challenge.
Shout out in the chat. Gotti Spiggles loves Fran Drescher's voice. That's not a comment you hear all the time.
She's, I mean, perfection.
Today's challenge is to make a third
And just like a
art
very good
project.
person in real life.
Yes, also yes.
Yeah.
Let's have a word from our sponsor,
Oh.
patron saint of quirkiness and new Old Navy spokeswoman,
Yep.
Mayim Bialik.
Hey, spring chickens.
Also, I don't know if anybody in the chat can identify who Jeremy and I would be if we were Mystery Science Theater robots.
Yeah, name which Mystery Science Theater character we'd be in the chat. Yeah.
There's a
All right,
right
it kind of
answer.
starts to go off the rails once they bring in just generic 90s references, but you get the point. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're dealing with here. This is, once
Yeah.
everybody kind of gets the vibe, this is all anybody can see from these characters. And so it's all they
Yes.
look for. One thing that I definitely learned a lot in my education was that, especially when it comes to cultural depictions, once you look for something, you see it more. Once
Right.
we are given, the kind of like, hey, look for these qualities in a quirky girl. Like, if a character has any of them, we assign her that label, even though it doesn't always work though.
That's right. Which in and of itself is harmful, but
Mhm.
I think that like a lot of the harm I've personally experienced at the hands of this has been like the expectation that I would be similarly stagnant and only challenging in these very safe ways. And then any
Right.
time that I'm kind of like, no,
Basically,
I've been
like the old-
punished. Yeah.
Yeah, the only time that quirky girls challenge their dudes, it's to like chase their dreams, and not
Or
like,
it's just like, ugh,
or like
I wish
quit
you
being
would
an
open a
asshole.
bank account. Oh my
Yeah, yeah.
gosh.
or like, hey, you're generically an asshole.
Yeah.
But even then, it's just like the solution is also presented in a bland way. This is a good time to bring up our little related trope skis.
Yay.
This kind of came up in our research. One that definitely. Oh, before we get into it, shout out to Gotti Spiggles in the chat for getting correct that Deming is Trace Bilyeu era Crow.
It's true.
I think that you're both Crow. I think you're a decent Bill Corbett Crow as well. I think I don't know. I think I do have some Kevin Murphy qualities. I don't have quite as pleasant a baritone singing voice as he, but I get that. I also feel like I'm a little Joel. I want to be a little more Joel than I'm getting.
You
credit
do have
for
some
here.
Joel in you, or you'd like to. I forget.
I'd like to. That's what it is. Yeah, one of his classic props. Oh, thanks for the moistness update. All right, we have a few examples of related tropes.
Yeah. And so sorry, before just
Yeah.
really quickly, so we're going to talk about related tropes, and this is
Yes.
definitely something that Jeremy is better at speaking to than I. But what we're kind of getting at is sort of transitioning away from what we would consider to be like failed attempted perversions, like New Girl, again, the lampshading. I think Eternal
Yes.
Sunshine has some lampshading as well, although it's like maybe perhaps like a more sophisticated media, but she definitely is like, I'm not like other girls, and then at the end is like, okay. So that's kind of upsetting.
Yeah.
And then we were kind of like with the being quirky, this is sort of a meta perversion, so like a direct like satirical approach, which
yeah, it's a sketch.
I think Ruby Sparks is a film that was designed to be like an entire satire. It's literally about a magical typewriter wherein like he just types up his dream girl, and then the second she starts to act with any agency, he's frustrated and he keeps, adding more attributes to her and making her do things. So to kind of like underscore through the lens lens of that narrative, just the lack of control, the stagnation that's expected of this, not so much character, but of this MacGuffin. So that's all. I think that around all of this time was when Nathan Rabin wrote his eulogy. He wrote an article called "I'm Sorry for Coining the Phrase," almost a decade after.
Yeah, there it is. Everybody can see it now.
Yes, it says queasy disbelief, as it seemed to take over pop culture. I think that Jeremy, like you put it perfectly right. It's almost like you get an Amber Alert and all of a sudden you're seeing a teal Camry everywhere. And also because and then of course there are just like reductive filmmakers that subsequently like begun to leverage this. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to touch on these in future Trope-O-Scopes. But thank you for letting me thank you for letting me enter that in. So related tropes, which is sort of a brand of perversion, either failed or meta. It can be either.
Sure. And a lot of the time it has to do with this sort of like, okay, if we're going to try to tell a story that has the vibe of a Manic Pixie Dream Girl story, what's the equivalent? And the equivalents that we've managed to come up with are not inspiring. I mean, entirely.
I say equally inspiring.
Equally not inspiring. The first one that really came up to me is like, if we're talking about a movie that's about a character who's stuck in a mode and then they figure out that they really gotta find some new kind of love all along because this person that didn't behave in the way that made sense to them. The first thing that we came up with, like, that I came up with as far as like an inversion or like a different, let's try it different, was Knocked Up. Like,
yeah,
and the depiction, man, Seth Rogen's character is, no Jess Day. Like, he's just like, he's working on, I love that the big runner was that they were trying to invent Mr. Skin, a website that already existed
the whole time.
And then like basically he just was like a stoner who got this very way above his station sort of like career woman pregnant and thus was connected with him. And it was in a completely random way. There was no, like, they barely are even shown to have known each other before she's pregnant. Like, they even go back and review the information of, like, how that happened after they already have a reason to be connected, and it just, like, sickens her from the jump. Because he's just, like, a fat stoner idiot who lives with, like, 5 dudes who are all equally, if not more, gross. And amazing casting on these dudes. It's, like,
but
Jonah Hill.
I would say, because, like, yes, okay,
Martin Starr,
amazing casting, and I would love
Jason
for you to go
Segel.
through that. But,
That's all I can remember.
I think that it's sort of, it's not his appearance that's important. It's that he's willfully stagnant. It's that he's like, yep, I'm doing nothing,
like, I'm killing
and that's fine.
Right. She asks him what he's doing. He says he's living off of a settlement. like,
right.
He's just got nothing going on.
And it's I don't want to in any way like create an equivalency between like ambition and like economic status or anything like that. I think it's truly that like she's trying to do shit and she's encountering challenges. She's trying really fucking hard.
Yes,
man. It's just everything. He's trying 0% hard, and then the second she's like, could you try hard at a thing a little bit? That's where the entire conflict of the film is.
They get in a huge fight. They get really angry at each other. The fight is entirely his fault, I would say, if I remember correctly. And then he comes back, like, and then what happens is, it's like, all he has to do to become redeemed is, like, get a job.
Which she, again, I think that, like, a big
clean
thing
his
that
apartment.
happens.
He read a baby book.
But, like, with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, there's a complete erasure of effort. Because it takes effort to, like, curl your dumb hair every day and to, like, buy all those ballet flags. They don't
make a million art projects. Yeah.
Right. This is all, like, things that take an intense amount of effort, but it's portrayed in the way that you showed in that Breakfast at Tiffany's clip, where it's you close the door, you open the door, she's flawless, and she keeps
How did Holly Golightly get a half a bathtub up to her place and fit it perfectly with like an upholstered cushion that would make that in any way a comfortable sitting situation. We're not shown this, but it is work.
Yeah. There's
Like,
a lot of work involved, and then to
yes.
foreground in the man child, like the fact that the work is honestly in that film portrayed as equal to work she's been doing this whole time
Yes.
is bonkers and
Yeah.
damaging.
I mean, I think they give themselves sort of a pass with her being portrayed as so type A that it's like any person might struggle to keep up. But he is coming from a place of, again, like to reuse this word, utter stagnation. He is just a dude sitting there getting high with his friends every day, making nothing, contributing nothing, doing nothing, offering nothing. And as
Which
soon
is
as he gets a girl
honestly-
pregnant, he has a purpose.
But it's yeah, exactly, that he's imbued with like some kind of reactionary
That's his
purpose,
value.
but
I mean, that's the
it's
part that's super
perfectly-
reductive.
I think it's perfectly fine actually to live that life, but it's not
Yeah.
fine to then live your life with as though the world owes you something if you're
Yeah.
not providing anything to the world. And I'm going to make the dumbest reference right now, but this is something that I've had like male friends of mine identify as being an important article to them. This is forever ago, and I think you might remember this. It was a Cracked article about like men. It was an advice article to men, and it actually does cite Zoe Deschanel in it even, but it's like
Yeah.
the world doesn't owe you anything. Women are like, just because you're nice to them, you can't win them. You're not the Karate Kid. That's not how the world works. You have to
Right.
actually like provide something and contribute
Yeah.
something before you can expect anything back. And that, like, you know, that
Mhm.
that I think there's a quote in it where it says that Zoe Deschanel lookalike that you like lust after at the bookstore, like she has salads for lunch and she has to like
Mhm.
you know do all this work just to even look that way. What the fuck are
Yeah.
you doing? And I think that that's kind of what's missing, is they don't acknowledge in portrayals of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, yeah, that she can't, like, Jess is always cooking sheet cakes and shit. She can't eat cake. Are you kidding?
Well, she I feel like it's almost like these that's a real person that you're talking about that can't eat the cake. And on TV, it's like she just chooses to have a very sensibly tiny slice of the cake so that she's happy. But that's not how people want to act. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, I think, yeah, I mean, as important as it is to say, like, hey, work on yourself, it's also just, like, manage your fucking expectations, because,
Right.
like, this also gives people, and this is something we haven't really addressed at this point, but I think this is an important time to identify it, relationship dysphoria.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
like, you look at like, if you look at Captain America's body and then you look at your own like body, if you're some dude watching a Marvel movie, you're like, whoa, I get why this dude's super strong, A, but also B, it's like, oh, no person can really look like that, but I kind of hate that I don't look like that. The same thing is true of a character whose whole existence is bringing quirky happiness into the world for no reason, who is just a happiness pump, who's happy to just give. Like, those people aren't real. It's not reasonable to expect them. If you're writing them, it's because you're writing a lazy love story.
Yes.
And that's not, and
Yes.
again, those things can still be enjoyable to watch and or commercially successful. We're not like condemning the use of these tropes inherently. We're not condemning enjoyment of any of these depictions. Like, we're not out here, you know, trying to fucking rip anything away from you, but just, you know, I
be
think
cognizant.
be aware of
Cognizant
the
that
impact of this stuff.
It's so fictional, it should be read as fantasy, frankly, is
100%.
basically what's up. And I think that there's to the other side of this where it's like, okay, like, don't expect this from your romantic partner, don't expect that from yourself. I think it is a cycle that perhaps, like, myself, a lot of my friends, even when we posted that we were going to be doing this deep dive into Manic Pixie Dream Girls, I had multiple friends DM me and be like, wink, from one Manic Pixie Dream Girl to another, because we've been treated this way with these expectations by romantic partners in our lives. And I think that we start to feel like we're flawed because we eat cake and gain weight, as opposed to a character that we see eating a dang sheet cake and then still being like, you know, a very slim, traditionally like perfect skinned, marketably attractive white woman who has a teacher's salary but an unlimited wardrobe. Like, we're like, well, what the fuck am I doing wrong? What's fundamentally flawed with me? When it's just that I'm not a literal fantasy character. Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very
That's
powerful.
my vibe.
Thank you for that. Speaking of
Yay!
fantasies, this is a perfect time to transition to our next segment here, because
I'm
it
good at transitions.
has to do with a ton of fantasy vibes here in this next section. Do you want to give us this? You want to tee us up here?
Ooh, yes. But are we going into Act 3 now?
Yeah, just name it, and I'm gonna push this button.
Act 3, voluntary transformative death. My favorite kind.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what we're doing. We're getting into it. We're going through the little long video transition that was so lovingly crafted, and we hope you like.
I love it so much.
It's happening. Yeah, we're back here in front of this, but let's go back to us.
We're going to talk about things that perhaps either knowingly or unknowingly actually we find were Manic Pixie Dream Girl tales, but that actually have that differentiator where the Manic Pixie Dream Girl or guy grows. And this is my absolute favorite example that I bring up all the time because I think I'm really smart for noticing it. But that Elf is a Manic Pixie Dream Girl tale. However, Zooey Deschanel's in it. She plays the straight man. She plays the straight white man protagonist that learns to be whimsical and grows through the antics. Will Ferrell, of course, as the Manic Pixie Dream guy, but from the very beginning, from the literal beginning of the film, it's differentiated because we have, again, a reason behind why he's obsessed with these things. It's not just like vague, my checks have baby farm animals on them, bitch. It's
right,
like,
just because I want them to. It's because he's
which
an
is
elf.
also fine. Which is also fine.
It's totally fine.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you did not. So sorry. Better than I. Tee up the clip for us, and then let's watch it.
Okay, yeah. Just to play off this, I think the reason that it's such a great one to highlight also is that it's like this is where films started to use this flavor in their recipe. Like the films that we're kind of going to go into in this section, to just inject it, but then take it in a different direction. I've been watching a lot of Top Chef, so maybe that's why I'm talking like this. But it's different. It's a deconstruction, but this is a real Voltaggio brothers.
Everyone's got a favorite Voltaggio.
Let me get the sound back on here. Very important.
You make me feel so young.
Like this hat.
This is their first date.
Both hats.
This is their first date. He's the quirky one. She's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? But then she gets drawn into the allure of the quirk.
And she still does a quirky thing before this 2-minute scene is over. A very quirky, adorable thing.
Reach out in front of you and take a sip.
This is the funniest part to me.
I do love it.
Yeah.
Well,
a crappy cup of coffee?
It is a crappy cup of coffee.
No, it's the world's best.
And note, she cannot be the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She is blonde.
Yeah. Yeah, she gets blonde hair in this movie, that's right. This guy's just here to bring whimsy to her life.
And she's like, maybe I should open my mind and whatever.
Yep. Oh, I forgot Christmas was fun. Oh, The Baxter. That is a classic film. What about The Baxter? Thanks, God Eats Bagels. Tip cheerleader.
I mean, truly.
No, literally, you can tip this with cheers.
No, I just mean that, like, the prom queen
Yeah, baby.
from Sprint Chat.
If you're watching this on YouTube later, it sucks to be you. You missed out on a good Twitch chat.
It's true. If you're watching this on Twitch later, oh my gosh, I love you. What's up?
Hi.
You look so good today.
Follow us, baby.
Like,
You look
what's
really
going
good,
on
but in a
here?
way that's achievable.
Like, you look like, I don't know. Is there something different?
Would you get taller?
It's working. It's working.
Anyway.
I don't know. It's whatever.
I just like
I'm being weird. I'm sorry.
I think that montage really shows like the energy that we're talking about. You know, once we have introduced and really normalized the use of whimsy as a character trait in a romantic comedy, or you know, we can get to places like what's a reason for a character to be whimsical? Maybe they're a literal elf. Like maybe they're.
But that's the thing. That's more interesting. The fact that being a literal elf
times
is
more
more multi-dimensional than being
it's
a
more
human
grounding.
woman.
Yeah. Well, it's more grounding because they give the character like get when you say this character is an elf, then like walking in, you have all this backstory that your character gets to know because of the common and pervasive nature of the Santa mythology. Like you're you know, we still have to do that work. Like it still has to happen in his performance, but the writing choices that they make at that point are all like centered around like world building, which we never get to. We don't get a bigger piece of the world of any of Zooey Deschanel's characters in these romantic comedies. Really, like we get to see she has a band, but like you know, even when she has like a shitty fight with Jim Carrey, she still just goes and plays with the band. Like it doesn't even affect that's happening. Like none of it has stakes, and none of it is like grounding. Grounding to me is
I think that's important.
That really...
I would agree. I think that there's no stakes, and then the other point that I would kind of layer on top of everything that you're saying is the way that the world interacts with that either MacGuffin or literal character. So in all of these other where Zooey Deschanel is playing the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, people react to her in ways that make no fucking sense, acting like she's not drop dead gorgeous, acting like the fact that she like hums sometimes is like wild and outrageous. Versus in Elf, they react to the Manic Pixie Dream guy like being like, they don't overact, they don't be like what, but they're definitely like the fuck though.
Yeah,
an appropriate like grounded kind of like world reaction around it is another differentiator.
Yeah, like it would not be unreasonable at a couple of points in Elf if somebody had just like if he had been restrained by the police, but it never gets there because everybody thinks he's a dork. Like it's not like it's just different. When we see
he does get arrested or something.
Oh no, you're right. I mean, as I said it, I was like, wait, that doesn't sound right.
Which is spot on though, yeah.
But exactly, like that's the difference, right? I guess it's not just growth that the characters are allowed to grow over time. It's also, I think, just as importantly, like being grounded, like not just being a little dandelion fluff ascending up into the sun, but also having roots, like coming from somewhere and ending up somewhere else. Like that's what gives characters agency in stories. That's what makes them protagonists and not window dressing.
Exactly. Yeah, that you're not like just decorative, which is such an issue, and which I think is super important to call out. So thank you. Did you have any other?
I just had one other thought, just in this kind of same vein, which is before we set up our next clip, which we got more clips for you. Don't worry about that. We talked about Manic Pixie Dream guys a little. The Baxter's a great example. The cop in Bridesmaids came up as an example in my research because he's just
from you specifically. It's a great call out. Yeah.
I mean, he's like a big wide-eyed sweetheart who always does the right thing. He's like he's a cop, which is actually like a perfect Manic Pixie Dream guy job, to be like a local cop.
How so?
Well, because he's portrayed as like a real Barney Fife kind of.
Oh,
just like he's not, an agent of like law enforcement. Really, he's just like a constable. He's like a sweet, well-intentioned, Like, he's just there to make sure everybody gets home safe and has a good time, kind of a thing.
He's sort of like he's powerful but powerless in a strange way, which is kind of how the Manic Pixie Dream person is always portrayed. Although God Eats Bagels makes a great point in the chat about Chris O'Dowd.
Yeah, he also I think the thing that was really, like, I mean, like, even in the scene when like Kristen Wiig's character wants his help, he lets her break like 15 laws before she like literally hits his car with her car, and then he finally acknowledges her. She's doing all kinds of crazy shit, but like, it doesn't really matter. Like, he knows that like, he has perspective and all that, and he's like, anyway. And he just,
but he does function the same way. Yeah.
And he believes that ugly carrots are lucky. Like, that's a real quirky, weird trait. He's like, oh, you got to eat the ugly carrot. It's lucky. Love that scene. That's a great movie. Go watch Bridesmaids once we're done with this. 13 Going on 30's got interesting MPDG-esque qualities.
Yeah.
Because it's like if you take a character with a bunch of agency and then strip her of all of it and make her an innocent child again in that person's body, which is fascinating.
It's such an interesting commentary because, like, it is a character, again, to the aspects of like people not like actively lusting after her. She's confusingly bumbling when it comes to just like adult interpersonal shit, and yet somehow enlightening. She's got the wisdom of a child. It's an infantilizing
She's literally
character,
childlike.
and to literally put that and to make her no, she's legit been infantilized through magic and whatnot. No, I think that was, I had not thought of that actually as an example of this until you and I were discussing this and you brought it up. I think it's a fantastic example.
Like, she's the worst kind of person, and then she becomes a child again and is instantly the best kind of person. There's nothing else has changed. Like, nobody else, I mean, like, she changes other people once she essentially regains her virginity. Let's talk about Enchanted. A movie that was originally written to be a hard R, and then Disney bought it. That's my favorite piece of Enchanted. I would love to see the hard R shooting script of this film.
Extremely same.
Yes.
But yes. So Enchanted is objectively good. It's objectively interesting, and it does a lot of things that I think are important. And I would say that it does a lot of things that we've been talking about that are important, right? It gives her a reason for being that way. It gives her character growth. She changes other people, but mostly like she changes. She's impacted by things. She's allowed to change, and other characters react to her in a grounded way. However,
and like whimsical yet grounded.
Yes, exactly. And I would say that the one additional thing that this movie also does, in addition to all of those things, is that it doesn't portray like this sort of like hyper femininity, frivolity, like recreational nonsense, which these are all fun things. Singing in the park, that's a fun thing to do. Wearing big puffy dresses, wanting to like make out with a dang prince, all of these things are fantastic. Sure. But it doesn't portray them as being necessarily aligned with being like a shallow person. You can be like a deep person that also craves some like fucking traditional storybook style romance, anything like that. And that is most clearly explained by the fact that sort of like the other female character in this, Idina Menzel, from like Rent and the OG Wicked, the Sage Productions, she's excellent in this, and she's kind of somebody who. And of course, Frozen. She lets it go. No, you did not. That's an important subtweet. But Idina Menzel's character in Enchanted, she essentially is somebody that like she's dating somebody who's kind of dour, and she's kind of trying to like appease him the whole time, but secretly she craves like this like traditional like romance, even though she's demonstrably a badass career bitch. She's like smart, cool, she has her own agency, but like guess what? She also wants to be a princess. That's perfectly fucking fine. And I love that the film Exactly. So we're gonna watch the ending scene of Enchanted, wherein the girl who came from a cartoon into real life rescues the man of her dreams. So an inverse in there, but then also we get to see what happens to Idina Menzel's character, which I really enjoy.
Real quick, also Ariel as Manic Pixie Dream Girl, she literally trades her agency for romance. All right.
I do. I would say like we need to talk about Ursula for 100 years.
I mean, that's
a
its
very
own
separate
whole.
conversation.
We gotta have a whole separate show called the Ursula-Sphere.
I
we
love
go.
Ursula.
Ursula's objectively one of the all-time great villains.
Is this a
I mean, just great people. Just great.
Oh, sure. Great networker. Goal-oriented.
So she's rescued her
Yep.
cynical man.
Yep, inverted.
She's rescued him from a literal dragon.
God Eats Bagel's asking for a reverse Little Mermaid, trading his legs to live in the sea.
I would join you happily.
You'd have to trade him for something. Gills at least.
Gills at a minute.
I love this effect. I want to spend a lot of time figuring out this little folding book,
storybook
pop-up
thing.
book effect. Yeah, the pop-up book, storybook transitions. Yeah, give us that Menzel. Look at that
She's
dress.
gorgeous.
It's amazing.
You know what? Nobody feel bad for her. She fucked Taye Diggs for years.
How many people can honestly pull off these gigantic shoulders that this dude is rocking right here? Not many.
Just James Marsden,
Basically just Marsden.
the real hero of the Notebook.
I'm just talking over the music every now and then so we don't get copyright struck. Nah.
Copyrights.
Yeah, this
Don't
is...
know about them.
Oh boy. Meanwhile, in front of Planet Hollywood. I mean, like...
I love it. It's okay
Yeah.
though. It's okay to like be like, you know what?
No,
Fuck
it's
it,
great.
I'm having fun. Yeah.
Just jump into an open
That's the
manhole.
thing.
Okay,
It doesn't
one
make
thing I
her
think this...
stupid.
I want
Yeah.
one reaction shot there of somebody watching him go in the hole, but I get the need for the instant transition.
But I love it. I love that.
Yeah,
like
this is a really cute moment that comes up here too. I've watched all these clips recently, so. Womp womp. Uh-oh.
Wow, really good reception here.
Bones are much cheaper in this universe.
she's not a different person, but she's doing what she wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's
And what she
yeah.
Yes.
That's characters having agency and growth at the same time. They
And
get to
it's okay
make choices that
if
make
you're
them happy
growing
and
but I
fit their
love that
personality.
But they're kind of both in weird ways growing towards things that could be stereotypically read as like shallow and frivolous, but they're not. They're actually like very deep examples of growth.
Yeah, I mean, like nobody wants something that's like deeply material, you know?
Right.
Like, I like this. Like,
Oh, I
this
forgot
guy.
about this.
Happy ending for Wormtail. Everybody's got books. Everybody's got book deals in this movie, which is a weird.
But everybody kind of
specific.
figured out where they fit in and like where they're happy.
Ooh. Shout out to Chill One JMO for calling out the A+ costume design within the Renaissance aesthetic. You never heard of Enchanted before, God Eats Bagels? This movie is
We would
pretty
enjoy
well known.
watching it. It is
Yeah.
not. It has nothing to do with El Enchanted, which I did.
It is not related to Enchanted. But look at it, like, meanwhile, the girl who started in the cartoon world gets a real family and still has a cool twirly dress, like, at the same time. Pretty important.
Exactly. But it's
Here we
grounded,
go.
and that's what she prefers. She prefers to
narrative
be
for you.
in this. Yeah, I don't know. It's,
Yeah, and here comes
it's a good
yet
fucking
like
movie.
another book reveal. Love this. This is such
Me
a...
too.
Whew, there it is.
It's a rich text.
It
It's
is.
a rich text.
Good one. That's pretty good. I cut it off for that little musical flourish that would foreshadow a later clip. We only have 2 more video clips left, but they're great.
We
yeah,
are
welcome to the
nearing
chat,
the
Chillin'
end,
David.
everybody. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Oh, I
promise
mean, this
we're
is
getting
awesome.
in
I
there.
don't think we need to apologize for taking up anybody's time. We're doing great here. This is fantastic. Let's talk about, like, these 2 characters in particular. I know you wanted to, you know, we got into them. I think the other thing, oh yes, looking at my notes here, you wanted to talk about another version of this that I do not have a clip of, which was May.
So, everybody, this is something that's arisen. I've spoke with a lot of different friends of mine about what it would be like if we had a Manic Pixie Dream Girl film, but that was from her point of view, right? Like that's so clear that the thing we've been dancing around that's missing is that she has an agency perspective, grounding in the real world, etc. And I think all of us very quickly landed on the fact that it would be a straight up fucking horror movie because she's a sociopath of some kind to be able to be such a like a weird stagnant happiness pump with all these quirks that she has no interest. It's not as though she's like, oh, I like scrapbooking because like it reminds me like of my culture, whatever. It's nothing like that. She's just kind of like,
My
don't
mom
ask
likes to
about it.
scrapbook, and I just like it.
Don't worry about it. Don't ask questions about me. I just want to talk about you. It would have been a horror movie, basically. So I don't know how many people have seen May. It's sort of a cult classic from like 2002, I want to say, starring a very young Anna Faris in a supporting role, essentially about a gal who, again, she from my perspective is gorgeous, but dark hair, so not beer commercial marketably attractive, but marketably attractive in a slightly desexualized way. She some of the backstory is that she grew up with a lazy eye and she has a contact to correct it, but she's still kind of shy and awkward. She has a doll that she really likes, that she's friends with, and then she does ultimately kind of decide, and she starts to interact with people, and then she sees people interacting with her. She sees herself being fetishized, and so her reaction is to fetishize other people in their specific body parts. So she fetishizes Anna Faris's neck as a result of herself being fetishized by Anna Faris romantically. She fetishizes some man that she meets because he has a tattoo that she likes in response to his fetishization. Ultimately, she decides the best course of action is to murder and cut up all of these people and then turn them into a Frankenstein doll that she can snuggle with. At the end, she is in agony that this doll can't see her, so she cuts out her good eye, gives it to the doll so that the doll can see her, and then the doll caresses her. And I think that as I was explaining this film to you, Jeremy, you
yes, I
pointed out...
I asked the big question, and I think this is going to be really important. Are all Manic Pixie Dream Girls codependent?
Yes.
It's hard to, especially like the classic depictions, they kind of seem to be. It's tough to tell because on the one hand, they're also depicted as being kind of like floating through the world unaffected, right?
Right.
Like they're able to find, positivity and things like that.
That's right.
But on the other hand, even like Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's at the beginning, as soon as like I forget the character's name.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter. As soon as he like he's at the end, he's like, I love you, you belong to me. And she does say like, no, like people don't belong to each other, and she kind of pushes back on that. He gets furious. He like gives her this ring, says like, I was gonna give this to you anyway, but now I don't want it. I've been holding it for months. And as soon as she sees the ring, she has a purpose she didn't know that she needed before. She stops the cab, she gets out in the rain, she chases him down, and they find the unnamed cat together, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
But it's tough. Like, I think that, I don't know that I'd say that, even when I asked this question, I wasn't sure the answer is yes. So I don't know that all Manic Pixie Dream Girls are codependent, but I would say that they largely propagate, like, codependent apologists. And,
I would agree with
that sort of vibe in the culture.
I would agree with that. I would also say that they are perhaps not as characters codependent, but that they are narratively codependent. A Manic Pixie Dream Girl does not exist to be a protagonist. So narratively, they only exist to highlight, like as a foil almost, like other things and to propel other things. So yes,
and, I think you and I are both people who have had our own relationships with the concept of codependence. And so we're like, as we learn about that, we can talk about it more completely. But what's a great example of being super codependent?
Yes,
is when you hold on to a grudge against an ex for a really long time. Which segues perfectly into 500 Days of Summer.
Can I just I know what we're building to
here. Your anger is profound.
Sweating. So it's basically just it's that this smug filmmaker is everything that's wrong when it comes to people mishandling tropes and shortcuts and shorthand and references and whatever, because he did it purportedly. And again, I think lampshading is probably like also applicable here, not just for this character, but for the whole thing, where he's like, no, like, it's, you know, he's not a fuckboy piece of shit asshole incel monster, because it's from his perspective. You know what I mean? He's growing, he's learning. No, he's not. All that it means is that we are endeared to a character that's abusing the Manic Pixie Dream Girl the entire time, who was very direct and honest with him. So the entire film, you know,
yeah, if you haven't seen that one, oh boy.
So Zooey Deschanel the whole time is like, oh, I don't want a relationship, sorry, whatever. And then, of course, he wants a relationship, and he just thinks, like, that's a quirk of hers, I suppose. And then when she doesn't want a relationship, as she's been saying, he's devastated and is very angry.
Super mad at her, yeah.
And then
she never did.
He runs into this character later, and she's now engaged, and he's like, wow, I thought you didn't want a relationship. And it's like, nah, bitch, she just didn't want one with you. Are you joking? Like, it's okay to be your own main character, but you have to acknowledge that you're not anybody else's main character. And that's kind of the issue, and that we're kind of allowing this person to feel entitled to be somebody else's main character, or at least to feel justified in that. And I will just say my very last thing is that this is no more so. I think it attempts to be subversive, but it's completely undermined by the very opening of the film, which is blatantly dedicated to the filmmaker's ex-girlfriend. He like names her full name. He calls her a bitch in the opening film. He's like, this is, you know, this, he says, this is fiction. It's definitely not about anybody, including so-and-so, you bitch. And then in Q&As after making this film, after debuting this film, people asked him, of course, like, oh, is that person a real person?
Is that real?
He said, yeah, you can find her on Facebook. And people did. People found her on Facebook. People harassed her. Apparently, she has Zooey Deschanel type aesthetic. Like, all of these things are fucking terrible. So
Not
yeah,
ideal.
you are not actually making a subversive film about putting women on a pedestal and the dangers of that, the dangers of projection, what that's like. It's literally just about the dangers to yourself, that if you might be disappointed if you put a woman on a pedestal. Not that that woman is a person herself. Scene.
Thank you, Deming. I mean, it's really just a bummer. And it really is, like, I think that's super emblematic of just like, wow, you're really working your issues out here on the screen, huh, buddy? Just at other people's expense. All right, let's watch this actually very fun scene from 500 Days of Summer, and then we'll talk about also the issues.
Are you going to play the whole scene? Because I need to run
It's like a minute
that.
and change. Yeah, okay, go and take a moment and come right back. All right, just you and me then, gentle viewer. Yeah, classic. I also, if I was feeling myself, would probably see myself as a Han Solo reflection. So I can't hate on that. I know our bitrate's gone down a little bit right here, and so if you've already seen this, you know what it is anyway. It's a low-quality YouTube clip anyway. But if you like us, click on the YouTube link there at the bottom, and you can follow our channel, and you'll get to watch this whole show back on the replay. That'll be a ton of fun for you, gentle viewer. Yep. Everybody's happy for him because he hooked up with Zooey Deschanel, and that's what the whole scene's about. It's about how happy he is. It's everybody around him is there for him and is happy for him. Nobody is just going about their days. Everybody drops everyeverying.
But what happened right before this scene?
Oh, hold on. Let me bring you back for everybody. I had turned your camera off because it was just your chair. Hold on. Deming's back, everyone. Hey, she just faded in like a reverse snap. Yeah, basically, we're just watching the classic "You Make My Dream" scene. They also appropriate, enchanted imagery here.
But I think that we should explain like what precluded this scene. Like, why is he happy?
Yeah. Let's. Well, I explained that the context was that he had just left her place,
After sex stuff.
Yeah, after sex stuff. And that's it. Clunk. End of the scene. Yeah, the thing that stands out to me in this is that, like, everybody just participates in his fantasy. And they're like, hell yeah, bro. You fucking did it. I'm surprised nobody asked to smell his fingers. Thought I'd get you a nod.
Yeah,
we honestly,
emotional.
it's like, it's over the top. So, well, I without even talking about it much more, I just want to contrast that with this similar but very different, also a dance sequence in a park theme.
So, Jeremy, and I'm so
Yes.
sorry to break the
By all means.
sixth wall or whatever this
Oh my
is,
god, we
but
have so many walls. That's why we're
too
doing
many
this.
walls.
Yes.
Build that. Never.
Go on. Let me write
Would
this
you
down.
mind?
Yes.
So a little behind the scenes.
Sure.
Could you? So you haven't been sharing the audio of the clips with me, so I can't been able to hear
have
any
you
of
not
them,
been able
which
to
is
hear
why.
them?
Which is why I've kind of been
All
like
right.
doing my like work zoom face, being
by,
like
please.
this listening.
You've just been nodding
But
along. I will make sure. All right, let me share this with you. So
I
you
just
get it
really, I
properly.
really want to listen to this one. That's all.
Is that what this chat message was about from an app 45 minutes ago? Yeah, okay, no problem. I didn't see that in Zoom. Let me share that with you. You guys could see a little behind the schemes here. All right, you should get it this
Wow.
time. I'm hopeful.
They're
I'm
so
optimistic.
real. I
They're
love how
really,
real they
really
are.
nice. So here it comes. Yes, this is the classic "That's How You Know" scene from Enchanted. Speaking of behind the scenes, it was in the interest of keeping these subtitles on screen that I shrunk our heads to not be like a full quarter of the screen, and you're welcome for that. I think it would have been a little much. Like,
I'm
instantly
sorry.
they meet a band. Love it.
But the fact that it's like it's incorporating like real life elements to it. It's not just like
Yeah. It's grounded. Like, that's what that's the difference. Like, it isn't just a flight of fantasy where everybody's so happy for Joseph Gordon-Levitt getting laid. In this scene, like,
they're reacting to each other. Yeah,
and
like
every
all of the
subsequent
characters.
scene that happens, they come across new musicians and other people that become the chorus. They're all like earned like developments. Everybody
Well, and-
follows along because she has like magic and also charisma. Where in Joseph
No, but
Gordon-Levitt,
it's-
it's just that he's walking around. Everybody drops everything to celebrate him. You know what I'm saying?
But it's truly that like she's like it takes the moment of like she looks at them and she's like, you get what I'm saying, right? It's not and they're reacting back like they're
She just brings them
she's
along.
interacting with the other characters and they're participating. They are all their own main characters because that's how life is. and
This
as
is
opposed to
such a
Joseph
fun
Gordon-Levitt
scene.
being
I mean,
yeah.
this is so watchable.
Yes.
Like, and it takes him so long to get on board. She's got like 100 people following her. She is the goddamn Pied Piper of Central Park at this point. She's got two different bands on separate boats following her, and he's still like, I don't know, is this girl for real?
But like
So
no,
funny
but
to
I
me.
still think that like to underscore like the whole thing though is that like these people it makes sense why they're participating. These are all performers and people doing stuff, and he's kind of like he's just sort of sheepishly embarrassed because he doesn't understand enthusiasm,
This is
which is sort of what's
wild.
happening. Yeah.
I mean, you got the old lady and gentleman chorus. I mean,
I love them.
this is
Because all these
such a
things
cute
are just in Central Park anyway. Like it makes sense. This feels plausible.
And I really don't sing.
It's just ridiculous, adorable. This girl showed up. She's just in a play, like, but it's all still like, it all still kind of fits. Like,
Yep.
they earn all these choices narratively because of just the background that all these characters come from a cartoon world and are being planted in the real world.
Right.
So they kind of have cartoon powers. Like,
But they
it's
get
not
hurt
just because.
too.
Yes, they get hurt.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, she has the ability to do this. She can sing a little bird song, and the birds show up, and they know where to take the flowers.
Yes.
I mean, this is, like, adorable and weird. Like,
but it makes the fact that again
Yes.
she has the history for why she's motivated in a way that makes sense. Like, you know, it makes sense why she has that skill. It makes sense why she's making that choice. It's not just like this is just my personality. Is I just choose to make doves fly.
like, they're fast reaching the point they need a permit, and like, this is just her being adorable. She can't help it. And yet, this is grounded just enough that you don't feel ridiculous watching it in the context of the film, because they earned it. It's not like...
I would say as well, like, she's not doing it for her own, to show off. She's doing it because she's trying to, like, help this dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's just trying to be like, dude, like, be nicer to your girlfriend, is the point of this song.
This is how you tell people that you love them.
Yeah, just like
everybody,
nice,
look, we all get it.
Like, be weird and whimsical, because it's that the form supports the message, and it makes sense why she has these skills for like this you know, cult leader like energy. All of that.
I cut this scene off a few seconds early.
established.
I cut the scene off a few seconds early, but at the tail end, we find out that the girl did get the flowers that the birds had successfully delivered the bouquet.
It's great.
It's like,
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, like, this
Very
is
charming.
Like, so if you're gonna play with these forms, it seems like in order to be like successful and elevating and not kind of leave people with maybe a shitty taste in their mouth, it's like you have to have the qualities of being in some way grounded, even if it's in a fantasy way, just like committing to the world and committing to the notion of giving every character like advancement over time. Like, every of the 4 main characters in the love stories that take place in Enchanted, all of them like develop as characters over time. All of them get a richer life for having been part of the experience. You have to, and I think the other part of it is that you kind of, on some level, if you're gonna have a movie that's like a romance that involves like a character that's sort of like a quirky person, I think on some level it has to be fun. Like, I think that, you know, like 500 Days of Summer is playful in ways, but they're all like show-offy.
It's a droll.
It's a lot. And like I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I like this like conceit of traveling back and forth through a timeline, and, you know, like a sort of horny Chris Nolan. But like, I don't, you know, but it doesn't hold up. It's not like, there's nothing you want to take away from it at the end of the day. There's nothing that you're like, oh, I gotta keep this with me.
Exactly. Yeah. The only like genuine whimsy is in the form of that film. There's no whimsy in any of the characters, despite the fact that he works at a greeting card factory or fucking whatever, and wears sweater vests and goes karaokeing. Like, and does the Pixies and shit. Like, there's no whimsy. It's still very like droll, because again, he's a boring character, and he is somehow the main character of his own life and everybody else's life around him. And anytime he can't handle, he must reject a situation where he's not the main character.
I also love the choice to write a romance about your own life and then cast Joseph Gordon-Levitt as you.
Okay.
And also just a note that we had just to kind of round off this section was this note that you had about that specific quality of like 500 Days of Summer, and that
like she is treated. That's the whole problem. That's why their romance doesn't work, is because he literally does the real life thing of treating her like a Manic Pixie Dream Girl. He puts her on the pedestal. He's very frustrated with her anytime she exhibits things outside of the purview which he has like projected on her, all of that shit. I mean, frankly, from the way that it's filmed, the way that it's done, we're supposed to be on his side when he's upset that she just continues living her life without him, all of those sorts of things. So it's truly like, it should be interesting. It should be a story of like, hey, like, this is what happens when you try and treat a real person like a fictional character, but instead we're still made to sympathize with him. And then what happens at the end, Jeremy?
He basically in the same moment that he decides maybe I need to do some work on myself and I learned something here, he meets another an insanely gorgeous woman who can't wait to talk to him. And we're shown, like, time to start the count over again, baby.
Yep.
There's no, like, it's like, there is something to the notion, and I want to talk about this with God Eats Bagels. I think there's something to the notion of deliberately creating shitty, hard to watch characters, and then letting the audience's reaction being negative guide them to having, like, flawed, shitty, hard to watch protagonists. And I'm not 100% sure that was the goal in this film. I don't think that it's... I mean, I haven't seen enough of the discussion from the person who wrote it to get the impression.
I've seen plenty.
So then you can weigh in.
No, I'm just saying that, like, you can't open a movie literally flaming your ex by name for not living up to your expectations and then affirming it on multiple public stages. First of all, fuck you. That is exactly, like, some of the original issues we're talking about, is that, like, she doesn't have... Look, even if she wanted a microphone, by the way, I don't know anything about this ex. Even if she wanted a microphone, the odds are she wouldn't be able to get one. She wouldn't be able to get a movie because she's on a dude. And her story wouldn't be as compelling. So, like, the fact that, like, it's not a tit for tat. This isn't the album Rumors. Like, fuck you.
I mean, God, I'd love to see a movie version of Rumors. If a couple that was getting divorced wrote a film together about the process of their divorce, that would be the most watchable film. I think the closest we've gotten to that... It would be the
opposite of Marriage Story.
I was going to say the closest we've gotten to that is The Breakup. That Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn. It's very painful to watch because it is so on point. But, like, nobody's, like, fully likable in that movie. Yeah, Marriage Story was the Netflix movie. Yeah, nobody's comes off clean in it, which is, like, interesting. And I think the natural reaction by the end of it is to side with the Jennifer Aniston character, but they still kind of redeem Vince Vaughn a little. Like,
but without merit, yeah.
Without merit. Yeah, kind
of without effort, because she's the one that's putting in the most effort in every angle, just like every other example we've talked about. He has to put in a minimal amount of effort to be given equal credit.
It's, like, ridiculous that he has to be talked into the notion of, like, can you do these chores in our house? Like, how does a person have a business and not have their head around that idea on some level to the point that they would need to respond in the way that his character does? But his character grows from that point for what it's worth. Still more impressive than anything in 500 Days of Summer as far as character growth is concerned.
But the onus for emotional labor in all of these things is on the woman. And I know that's kind of across the board and also in real life. But, like, I just remember... So I watched this movie, I think I was probably, like, 14 or something, like, in theaters. And your takeaway when you're, like, a young gal, like, grown up, is like, oh, I don't want to be a shrew. Right? Because of the way that every other character reacts around her. Okay? Like, you don't watch that movie and think, oh, that's a good point that she's making. You watch that movie and you're like, oh, everybody else is being like, she's being a bitch. So I guess I should not ask for help on chores. I guess I shouldn't expect equal effort. And I think that these, again, are these things where we're more familiar with fictional people than we are with real people.
Yeah.
And with fictional
and also we bring in ourselves into the theater. We're not, nobody, because to me, it's so funny that you would say that, because to me, my takeaway watching that movie was, like, these are not unreasonable asks. She's not being unreasonable here.
Funny.
Like, he is being an asshole, and there's no need. Like, there's no call to act this. There's no reason to act the way that he acts. At every point, like, all of his moves are spiteful. She does a few moves that are kind of spiteful, but it's, like, not, to me, ever on the same level. Like, as the shit he does super casually.
I would
like,
say
hers are all, like, presentational moves. And his are all, like, whatever, fuck her.
The spite aspect of it is that she's going to be doing something, frankly, that's for him out of spite, and he's going to be doing something that's also for him out of spite towards her.
That's an interesting point.
They're all still motivated.
They're both as gratifying him.
For him.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, it's some fun stuff, but can we get to Resurrection in a sense?
Well, with that, let me push the button for Resurrection and ascent.
Because I want to get out of the breakup. Let me
We're
out.
out of here. We're out. We're moving on to a new discussion. Yep. Resurrection and ascent. This is another key part of our little story platform here, which I'll take us back to.
It's the final part.
Yeah, basically, well, it's the second to final.
Well, okay, true.
Basically, yeah, we're in the second to last stage here. As my connection becomes extremely unstable, let's take a moment for that to even back out. I saw my connection said KBS 18. Is that good? We'll be all right. I still see you fine, so we'll get the recording in it. Nothing else. The question in Resurrection and Ascent is, what does success look like? What does success look like? What should it look like? You know, we've talked about it a little. We kind of started this a little, put the cart ahead of the horse here, but like, what's an example to you of something doing this right, Deming?
Yeah, so we've talked about some examples. Like Enchanted is a really great one. Something I mentioned earlier is that I feel like this character trope is rooted in sort of these like screwball comedy, like these Howard Hawks beauties that are just like the wacky ones, like a Carol Lombard. I think Katharine Hepburn in Bringing Up Baby is typically, it's like a 38 film, and she's credited with being sort of like the OG, like the first film example of this type of character. But my favorite like black and white actress is Barbara Stanwyck, and she does a lot of this character actually really well with depth. So there's a movie called Ball of Fire, wherein it's sort of a retelling actually of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But the whole thing is that she's like a mob wife who ends up with a dull she's stuck with a dull professor type. But then she learns and she grows, and the differentiator there, of course, is growth. And I think that's something we've harped on quite a bit, is that like it's small things. It wouldn't add to your fucking runtime to give her, I don't know, an inkling of a backstory, right?
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't add, it wouldn't disrupt from your dumb jerk off narrative to say, oh, well, this is actually why she's doing any one of these things for a reason other than to impress this dude. And then similarly, to have her be changed whatsoever in the end. And this is, I would say, like the antithesis, like the example of the worst lack of success would be actually the television show New Girl, which again, we both like. But that is, we watched a scene from the very, very beginning of that show from season 1. I think it's the second or third to last episode of that show, wherein every other major character has made substantial career changes, life changes. They're living different places, all of this. But her central plot, she's about to get proposed to, right? By a character who's had this dramatic arc. He's become very successful in a field he's been aspiring towards with trials and tribulations. He's learned a lot. He's speaking differently. He's a lot more refined. But the big obstacle, for like him being able to propose is that she's too excited about a puppy. And that's not an exaggeration. That's the literal plot of her proposal episode. Everyone else is also trying to help make sure this proposal happens. They have kids now. They have different families. There's even an implied 3-year gap between the second to last and the final season. The final season should be some kind of an epilogue. We should have been afforded some kind of like bonus growth to her. That's an opportunity to make changes. And instead of doing anything, she almost misses out on getting proposed to because she's too excited about a puppy for 30 minutes. That would be the antithesis of success.
Yeah, that's
success
like a
like
paralytic level of
quirkiness. We talked about. Insane.
Yeah,
fucking insane.
I would say.
Isn't she supposed to be like almost 40 by then? Are you joking?
Yeah. As far as like, I'd be interested to see also, stabs at this from non-white dude writers, like stabs at magical love interests that are not written by dudes who would look like me if the camera was out of focus 9 times out of 10. I think that would probably be a step towards the right direction as well. I mean, like, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the notion of a fantasy story about a love interest who is flawless, who doesn't have to remind you of some shitty thing that some person did to you or whatever. Like, there's reasons behind that in and of itself being like catharsis and fantasy and all that. But I think that what happens when I mean, this is just a byproduct of like the structure of how movies are made as much as anything else, and we're, adorable little weirdos like throwing rocks at it from the outside. But like, there's no diversity in these depictions because there's no diversity in the depictors. Like, and so when we just hammer down on these same images for decade after decade, they can't help but get flat. They can't help but everybody's it's also like, maybe if you go so deep in it, it's like, we can't mine for Quirk for too long. We just want to write a movie this year and get paid to be screenwriters. So let's just give her some stuff to do.
Then write a horror movie.
I totally agree. I mean,
I'm joking.
We're gonna have we're definitely gonna do a future film sprint stream that's book club, and I definitely at some point wanna read Thomas Lennon and Robert Ben Garant's How to Make Movies for Profit, because it's such an interesting examination to me of the process of being a studio filmmaker, of being a writer, and how, like, you literally get to a point that's like, yeah, it's nice to make the work, but it's also nice to eat, and like, this is the way that I can make my year's salary, is to like get this movie completed. So at a certain point, you just, they're like, they wrote Herbie Fully Loaded. They were taking a lot of notes. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've done other successful, interesting, good movies, but they've sold a lot of movies as well. And so when they tell you, like, here's how to do it in a way that's like profitable, it's not meant to be like, here's the deification. It's just like, this is what the mass media does. It's not the same as like, just because it is a film doesn't mean that it's like necessarily got purely artistic intent. When we try to make these things commercial, we got to make them palatable to a certain extent as well. And that's
I don't mind a Walgreens brand, but I will say, okay, I want to call out a couple things before we get to our the finishing of it. How do we enjoy this still? Which clearly we do, because I can talk about New Girl for way too long.
Let me play one more little graphic then if we're getting to our last chapter.
Wait, I want to call out some things that were said in the chat first.
Okay, let's do it. Let's bring in that's such an important point.
Sorry. Okay, so I really love that God Eats Bagels called up Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It Hot. Again, that's like a screwball comedy type character. She also, she has flaws. She's blonde. She's not a Manic Pixie Dream Girl, but she's very much in that tradition. Right? Yes. If you sand her down, you smooth off her alcoholism, you make her a brunette, bam! She's a Manic Pixie Dream Girl. Yes.
I would say one other note I have about that is that another thing that's different between Some Like It Hot and classic MPDG films is that the male characters like do more weird stuff. They cross dress. They're like follow a lady band on a train. They do weird stuff to follow the woman. So they're not purely like they are chasing her in a different way. It's not like I'm here, a character waiting for you to come like make me whole. Like, they're chasing her because they want her, which is slightly different. And yeah. Oh,
and
also,
I'm going to greatly reduce. This point that God Eats Bagels is making is very important. I'm going to horrifically reduce it because I want to save a little piece of the pie of what you're saying there. Because I think that what you're saying is very important. So for anybody that's watching this on YouTube, to connect this to horror, I'd say relationships outside of cis heteronormativity are usually coded in horror since it's historically been a transgressive genre. I completely agree that horror gets to exist on its own. I would love to have a conversation with you, Jeremy, and God Eats Bagels, and everybody else about horror, and because I think that this intertwines quite interestingly with all of the commercialization economic issues, as horror is actually the genre with like the highest ROI, right? You make the most money off of horror for a lot of reasons,
and you can make money.
You make a ton of money. You make it all in the first weekend, which is when you get the cut of the profits, all those kinds of interesting things. And and that's why you can be fucking weird and
Just
do
to touch
bonkers shit. And it's, sorry.
Oh, just
That's
to
all
touch
I
one
have to
other
say.
thing on
I
the
promise.
specific thing that you said is that when you make all your money in the first week, it doesn't matter what people thought of it. You already made your money.
Exactly.
You don't have to, like, if you already made your investment back, it doesn't matter if people want their money back. You there's no refunds at there are refunds at the theater, but you got to be a real, bring it, real squeaky wheel, I guess the word I'm looking for.
Right.
It's not, nobody's like going back in droves because they didn't like the tone of the film. That's not really how it works. So you can kind of be transgressive. You can diminish people to their stereotypes, and you're not really punished for it in the way that other genres might be. Like if you were to make, obviously, I'm not here to hold up the Marvel films as like paragons of filmmaking. I think they do a lot of stuff really brilliantly, and they do a lot of stuff plenty lazy as well. But I do think that there's a certain amount of the way that those films are presented now that is more responsive to criticism than these films used to be, and that's I like that's how we end up with a Black Panther, a Captain Marvel, a Miss Marvel coming up. Like these are and they're all like enormous commercial successes as well.
Right.
Because they're actually like, if you give fucking Ryan Coogler a chance to make a Marvel movie, he's gonna make a fucking great one, and he did. Like, but why? Because Ryan Coogler's a fucking great filmmaker. Like, it's Oof.
Lots to say.
I have a little story about Ryan Coogler real quick, just to take a total side note, and then we can finish our final segment here. A friend of mine went to film school with him, and a few years later was like riding on the BART train and ran into him, and they were like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And they like said hi, and Mr. Coogler said that he was out there doing a location scout for a film he was working on. And the guy goes, "Oh man, that's so cool. It's awesome that you're making something. Let me know if you need any help on it. I'd be happy to come." Like film students talk to each other. And turns out he was out there scouting for fucking Fruitvale Station.
That was gonna be my guess.
Yeah, that was what it was. He was out there scouting for Fruitvale Station. So it was like
BART,
his.
Yeah,
he was on BART. He was just out there looking at stuff, just taking notes, figuring out how he wanted to approach stuff. Honestly, like, if you want a really good filmmaking experience that makes those kind of like big studio pictures enjoyable, watch Ryan Coogler's commentary on Black Panther. It's fantastic. He's like such a to be able to not just create something that's that complete, but then on top of that to be able to articulate it in a way that really, like, I don't think it's possible to watch his commentary and then go back and watch the movie again and see it the same way without seeing so much of his intent. That's what I like in good commentary. I love director commentary, and it's the thing I miss most in our streaming
art
world.
and intent, man.
Hashtag
That's
bring
true,
back
me too.
director's commentary. That's not an effective hashtag. It's got too many characters. All right, let's move back on to our final act. Hi, everyone. It's time for Act 5, the theme in which we discuss the return
How do
to
you
the
still
known.
enjoy? Yeah, how do we return
How
to
do
the
you
known?
still
How
enjoy
do we
things?
still enjoy things? How do we enjoy things that have shitty things in them? And this is not to say that like nothing should be eradicated. Like, okay, Song of the South, like there was nothing redeeming about that. But sometimes like good, fun, enjoyable things have shitty aspects. And I think that
Yeah.
Manic Pixie Dream Girl films have that. Cognitive dissonance is an important coping mechanism. But I would say that, like, Jeremy, my pitch to you, and you can pitch
Yeah.
back to me, my pitch
All
to
right.
you, how do you enjoy this? is you straight up view it as a fantasy film, and you straight up view the Manic Pixie Dream Girl as a sort of like magical realist character in that film, not an actual person. What's your counterpitch or agreement?
Well, to a sort of a complimentary pitch, I would say that to me the way through is detachment, just like with codependence. To not go into it with expectations of representation. I think that will at least allow you to enjoy your own viewing of it. For me, I started my career in the visual arts, working in sports broadcasting, and for a really long time, after I first got into it, and I started thinking of everything that I had gotten yelled at for as a professional, semi-professional. Every time I saw one of those things on screen, it would like take me out of it. I became a very annoying person to watch stuff with because I was like, "Oh, this happened and this happened," and people were like, "I'm just trying to watch the game, bro."
I get it.
So I think part of it too is like to not nobody like I don't think I don't want to say like don't get on a soapbox about it, but like I think discussing those things in like the venue, like don't ruin it for other people. I guess that's what I'm getting at. You don't have to ruin it for other people if you don't like stuff. But also
I think I would say like to that specific point, like my asterisk would be first of all, 100% agree. But I would say react to a moment like that the same way you would react to like bad CG, right? To be like, oh, that's super unrealistic.
Yeah,
like,
that
if
took me
that's
out of
appropriate.
it. Is a totally acceptable way to talk about stuff like this. And also just kind of like, films, especially like studio movies, are there for entertainment. They're not there to provide deep meaning. They're not there to necessarily like show us human truth. And so I think that we can get caught up in all the ways that they fall short of achieving those goals and then decide that stuff's like not worth it, or that it like I think you and I, especially the longer we continue to talk about this, the stuff that we like that is certainly read as problematic, that's a long ass list for you and me both.
Yes.
So we're not here to, as I've heard you put it before, we're not here to yuck anybody's yum. We're not here to tell you not to like the stuff you like, just because we want to have a conversation about impact. And that's, I think, the goal here on this show, is to just kind of look at what happens, look at the things that come off in these films and this work that is not necessarily the intended outcome, that like the ways that are the biases we bring into something affect our ability to create and also our ability to enjoy. It is undeniably harder for you to enjoy a Manic Pixie Dream Girl depiction than it is for me to enjoy one. Why? Because it was written to gratify me. Like like that was the goal. It was written for that purpose. And and obviously, there are examples where those dynamics are reversed, but in terms of like this specific genre, I think, for me, the key to enjoying this stuff is like treat it like pornography. Like, like appreciate when you're watching something like this that it is fantasy, that it is wish fulfillment, that real people don't act this way, don't look, walk, talk, or behave this way. And if they do, they're not going to act like a character that does. Like, if you see a person who genuinely wants to stop and sing with a band in Central Park, that's not because they fell through a portal from the cartoon universe. They have other stuff going on.
You should examine that as them as being a characteristic of them. That there's a reason for them doing that, and that you should not assume anything, nor most especially you should not expect anything from them that has to do with you as a result of that.
I think the goal on the Trope-O-Sphere is to get you to a point where you can see enough of the landscape of how this is done that you can reach past those stereotypes, reach past those easy depictions, and try to find something a little more complete. You know, it's a good another way to enjoy watching these movies is to actively empathize with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl character rather than try to chase like
Yes.
where the film's trying to take you. You know, for me, like figuring out like like trying to figure out the stuff that we're not being shown about why Zoe Deschanel's doing whatever she's doing in whichever Zoe Deschanel movie is often more interesting to me than where the story wants to go.
Right.
You're allowed
That's
to
well put.
imagine while you're watching stuff, so you know, use your noggin. We have any other thoughts here? Anything else we want to bring up as we bring this bird into the runway?
I feel like I have brought this trope to completion. So I know that we have an ending catchphrase.
That's right. It's time for the catchphrase. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now descending from the Trope-O-Sphere. As you return to your normal watching, please do so safely. Good night, everybody.